The treaty signing ceremony was nothing short of regal chaos. The alien queen Stara, draped in shimmering scales that reflected her towering pride, glared at the human ambassador with a mix of disdain and reluctant acceptance. The terms were clear. For the sake of galactic unity, she had to produce an heir with this so-called representative of Earth. To her, it was nothing less than a humiliation, but her advisors insisted this was the only way to secure the alliance. Rick Harlan, the human ambassador, stood on the opposite end of the room, his confident smirk making Stara's tail twitch in irritation. He looked entirely too relaxed for someone about to partake in what her species considered a sacred, near impossible endeavor. "All right," Rick said, clapping his hands together with a grin. "Let's make history, shall we? Or, at least make something." Stara's eyes narrowed. "This is not a matter for your primitive humor, human. Our fertility rites are delicate, sacred, and not something your kind can simply bumble through." "Hey now," Rick replied, undeterred. "I might be human, but I've got a reputation for getting things done. Efficiently." Stara snorted. Efficiently? If only he understood the gravity of her people's fertility challenges. It took years of rituals, energy synchronization, and biological alignment to produce an heir. No human could comprehend the intricacies involved. Her advisors began explaining the process, their voices a soothing hum in her mind. But Rick, oblivious to the ceremonial gravity, interrupted. Wait, hold on." He gestured toward a sleek device that looked suspiciously like a high-tech screwdriver. "Is this the thing that's supposed to help? What does it do, tighten some cosmic screws or something?" "That," one of Stara's advisors hissed, "is a fertility calibrator. It harmonizes." "Got it," Rick interrupted, picking up the device with a casual shrug. "Point and shoot." "Easy," Stara bristled. "You will show respect for..." But before she could finish, Rick activated the device. A soft hum filled the air, followed by a sharp, resonant pulse. Stara's body stiffened instinctively as the pulse traveled through her, leaving her stunned into silence. "Well, that's a neat little gadget," Rick said, inspecting the device. "Didn't think this tool would work so well." The room was silent. Too silent. Stara felt an unfamiliar warmth in her core, a sensation so alien and immediate that her mind reeled. Her advisors exchanged panicked glances, their antennae twitching in disbelief. "What just happened?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. One advisor hesitated before stammering. "Your Majesty, it appears the process has succeeded." "Succeeded?" Stara's voice rose an octave. "That's impossible. It takes years to..." "Congratulations, Your Majesty," Rick interrupted with an infuriatingly cheerful grin. "Looks like we've made a royal baby. First try, too. Efficiency, am I right?" Stara's tail lashed out, knocking over a ceremonial urn. Her cheeks burned with humiliation and rage. This couldn't be happening. The entire room stared at her, their expressions a mixture of awe and horror. She had become the first queen in recorded history to conceive on the first attempt, a feat so unprecedented it bordered on sacrilege. "You," she growled, pointing a clawed finger at Rick. "You've insulted our sacred traditions with your crude biology." Rick raised his hands defensively. Whoa, hold up. I didn't do anything wrong. If anything, I deserve a pat on the back here." "A pat on the..." Stara's voice cut off as her fury reached its peak. Her scales glimmered dangerously, and her advisors began backing away. Rick, sensing the growing tension, attempted to defuse the situation. "Look, Your Majesty, maybe we just work differently. Humans are known for our adaptability, you know? One shot, one success. You should be proud." "Proud?" she hissed, her eyes blazing. "This is an insult. An affront to everything my people stand for. Fertility is not supposed to be instantaneous." Rick, ever the opportunist, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, on Earth, we call this a win-win situation. Quick, clean, effective. No candles, no chanting, just results." Star's claws scraped against the marble floor as she took a threatening step forward. I should have you imprisoned for this travesty. Rick gave her a sheepish grin. Hey, at least I'm saving you years of trouble. Efficiency, remember? Get out of my sight, Stara snarled, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. As Rick left the chamber, whistling nonchalantly, Stara turned to her advisors, her fury unrelenting. Find out how this happened. Now. In the corridor, Rick muttered to himself with a smug chuckle. Guess I've still got the magic touch. Stara paced the royal chamber, her tail swishing erratically behind her as she grappled with the news. A queen's first duty was to uphold the dignity of her bloodline, and now she was the center of a galactic scandal. An heir conceived on the first attempt? The implications were as humiliating as they were baffling. Her people revered the fertility process as an arduous journey, not some spontaneous outcome courtesy of a smug human. Her advisors stood in a tense semicircle, each too nervous to speak. One finally broke the silence. Your Majesty, it is remarkable. Perhaps humans possess unique. Do not finish that sentence, Stara snapped, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. This is not remarkable. This is an insult, one advisor dared to suggest. The news has already spread to the outer colonies. Many are interpreting this as a sign of human prowess. Prowess? Stara snarled. They are primitive creatures who stumble through existence. Their biology is an anomaly, not a gift. Her fury was interrupted by a knock on the chamber door. Before anyone could react, the door slid open, and Rick strolled in, exuding his usual air of carefree confidence. Hey, Your Majesty, he said casually. Heard I'm a hot topic in the palace. Guess I've been making waves. Stara's eyes narrowed into slits. How dare you barge in here uninvited? Rick raised his hands in mock surrender. Whoa, take it easy. I thought you'd want to discuss, our success. His smirk deepened. After all, it's not every day you make history with someone like me. Her claws dug into the armrest of her throne as she hissed. History? You have made a mockery of my culture, human. Rick shrugged. Hey, I'm just doing my job. And let's be honest, this whole thing worked out better than anyone expected. Better? Stara's voice dripped with venom. You've reduced a sacred ritual to a biological accident. My people's traditions are about discipline, precision, and reverence, not your reckless efficiency. Rick tilted his head, feigning thoughtfulness. You say reckless, I say effective. Tomato, tomato. Her tail lashed dangerously close to him, and he wisely took a step back. Listen, he continued. I get that you're upset, but maybe you're looking at this the wrong way. Sure, it was quick, but think about what this means for your people. You've got an heir now. Problem solved. Stara's jaw tightened. Do you have any concept of what you've done? My people will interpret this as weakness. They will think I relied on a lesser species to achieve something I should have done with dignity. Rick's brow furrowed. Lesser species? Ouch. And here I thought we were bonding. There is no bond, she roared, her voice echoing through the chamber. You are an embarrassment, not a partner. Rick couldn't help himself. Well, Your Majesty, if I'm such an embarrassment, why did it work so well? Looks like my inferior biology is pretty compatible with yours. The room fell silent. The advisors exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Stara's scales seemed to glow with barely contained rage, her claws flexing ominously. Rick, either oblivious or fearless, pressed on. Look, I get it. You're upset because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. But maybe, just maybe, you're overthinking it. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. Her tail slammed into a nearby pillar, cracking the stone. Get out. What? Rick asked, genuinely surprised. Get out. Her voice was a low, menacing growl. Rick gave her a half-smile. All right. I'll leave you to process. But for the record, you might want to consider this a win. Not every species can handle human efficiency. He turned and strolled out, leaving a tense silence in his wake. The moment the door closed behind him, Stara rounded on her advisors. I want a full analysis of this incident. Every detail, every variable. I want to know exactly how this happened. One advisor stammered. Your Majesty, it may simply be that human biology is uniquely compatible. Unacceptable, she barked. There must be more to it than that. Investigate every angle. This is not over. As her advisors scattered to fulfill her orders, Stara sank into her throne, her mind racing. She couldn't deny the truth. The human had succeeded where countless others had failed. The very thought was maddening, but a small, infuriating voice in the back of her mind whispered an even more troubling thought. What if he wasn't just lucky? What if humans were truly as adaptable as they claimed? The idea sent a shiver of unease through her, but she shoved it aside. No, this was a fluke, a humiliating, inexplicable fluke. And she would prove it. One way or another. The news spread faster than Stara had anticipated. Across the galaxy, her name was on every communication channel, not for her strength, not for her leadership, but for the scandalous revelation that she had conceived an heir with a human. Commentators speculated wildly, calling it everything from a divine miracle to a genetic anomaly. Alien leaders issued statements, some congratulatory, others questioning the implications of human involvement in such a significant event. Rick, on the other hand, was basking in the attention. He strolled through the palace corridors with an infuriating sense of ease, his reputation as a miracle worker growing by the minute. The palace staff whispered as he passed, their antennae twitching in curiosity and amusement. Well, guess I'm famous now, Rick muttered to himself as he overheard a group of guards discussing the event. Not bad for a guy who just followed instructions. Stara was not taking it nearly as well. In the Grand Council chamber, she sat at the head of the table, her advisors presenting reports of the galaxy's reaction. Each update only fueled her frustration. Your Majesty, one advisor began cautiously. The outer colonies are interpreting this as a sign of human superiority. They believe this partnership represents a shift in power dynamics. Superiority? Stara spat, her claws gripping the armrest of her chair. This is not superiority. This is unfortunate biology. Another advisor hesitated before adding. There are also requests, formal requests, from other species. They wish to study the human ambassador. Some have even proposed inviting him to assist in their own fertility efforts. The Queen's eyes narrowed dangerously. They want to what? Apparently, word of his success has spread. Many believe he possesses a unique genetic advantage. Stara's tail whipped against the floor, the sound reverberating through the chamber. This is outrageous. My people are warriors, conquerors, not recipients of human charity. The advisors exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing further. They knew better than to provoke her when she was like this. Meanwhile, Rick was summoned to a separate chamber where diplomats from other species had gathered. He walked in, his usual confident grin plastered on his face, only to find himself bombarded with questions. Ambassador Harlan, a reptilian diplomat hissed. Is it true that you achieved conception on the first attempt? Rick raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I guess so. Not to brag, but remarkable, another diplomat interrupted. Would you consider assisting our species next? We've been struggling with population decline for centuries. Rick blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Wait, you're asking me to? Yes, the reptilian diplomat confirmed. We would compensate you generously, of course. Rick scratched the back of his neck, trying to suppress a laugh. Look, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not exactly running a galactic fertility clinic here. Besides, I think Her Majesty would, have some strong opinions about this. As if on cue, Stara stormed into the chamber, her presence commanding immediate silence. Her glare was fixed on Rick, who raised his hands defensively. Don't look at me, he said quickly. I didn't invite them. What is the meaning of this? Stara demanded, her voice icy. Why are you all gathered here, discussing matters that are none of your concern? One of the diplomats stepped forward hesitantly. Your Majesty, we mean no disrespect. We simply wish to understand the unique capabilities of the human ambassador. His capabilities are irrelevant, she snapped. This is a private matter, and it will remain so. Rick, sensing an opportunity, decided to chime in. I mean, they've got a point, Your Majesty. Maybe humans are just naturally good at this sort of thing. Could be worth exploring, scientifically speaking. Star's glare could have melted steel. Do not test me, human! Rick raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. Just saying. The diplomats quickly excused themselves, leaving Rick and Stara alone in the chamber. The tension was palpable as she rounded on him. Do you have any idea what you've done? She hissed. You've turned my people's most sacred tradition into a circus. Rick shrugged. Hey, it's not my fault everyone's impressed. Maybe you should take it as a compliment. A compliment? She repeated, incredulous. This is a disaster. Come on, Your Majesty, Rick said, his tone light. You've got an heir now. Isn't that what you wanted? What I wanted, she growled, was to uphold the dignity of my people. Not to have it reduced to a galactic joke. Rick tilted his head, studying her. You know, maybe the real issue here isn't me. Maybe it's your people's obsession with making everything so complicated. Sometimes simple works. Her claws flexed, but she didn't respond. His words, infuriating as they were, struck a nerve. She hated to admit it, but there was a sliver of truth in what he said. Her people's rituals were steeped in tradition, but had they become so rigid that they couldn't adapt? Rick, sensing he touched a nerve, decided to push his luck. Look, I get it. You're mad because I broke the rules. But maybe breaking the rules is exactly what your people needed. Do not presume to lecture me on what my people need. She snapped, though her voice lacked its usual venom. All right, fair enough, Rick said, backing off slightly. But for what it's worth, I think this could be a good thing. You've got an heir, the galaxy's talking, and hey, maybe humans and your people aren't so different after all. Star's eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. For the first time, she wasn't entirely sure how to respond. The throne room was eerily quiet, a rare moment of calm after days of chaos. Stara sat on her throne, her claws tapping against the armrest as she reviewed reports from her advisors. The initial shock of the situation had subsided, but her frustration lingered. Her reputation, her culture, her people, all had been overshadowed by the ridiculous notion that humans possessed some mystical fertility prowess. It was absurd. And yet here she was. Rick entered the room unannounced, his usual grin plastered across his face. Stara's eyes flicked toward him, but she said nothing, waiting for him to make the first move. He didn't disappoint. So, he began casually. I hear I'm the talk of the galaxy. Didn't think I'd be a celebrity for, that reason, but hey, I'll take it. Her tail flicked irritably. You are not a celebrity, human. You are a nuisance. Sure, but a productive nuisance, Rick countered, flashing a cheeky smile. Come on, Your Majesty, you've got to admit, this has worked out better than anyone expected. Better? Stara's tone was sharp, but there was a hint of exhaustion in her voice. My people are questioning centuries of tradition, my allies are mocking me, and my rivals are plotting ways to exploit this situation. Tell me, human, how is any of this better? Rick took a step closer, his expression softening. All right, look, I get that this isn't what you wanted. But maybe it's not the disaster you think it is. Your people have an heir now. Isn't that what really matters? Stara let out a low growl, her claws digging into the armrest. What matters is that I maintain the respect and loyalty of my people. This outcome has jeopardized that. Has it? Rick asked, crossing his arms. Because from where I'm standing, they're more impressed than anything else. Sure, they're confused, maybe even a little weirded out, but deep down, they know you're still their queen. Stara's gaze hardened. And what of the other species? Do you think they view this as anything but a humiliation? Rick shrugged. Honestly? Some probably do. But who cares what they think? You've proven something they can't ignore. Humans and your people can work together. Literally. Her tail snapped against the floor, but this time, there was less force behind it. You are insufferable. And you're stubborn, Rick shot back. But that's probably why this whole thing worked out. You're too determined to let something like this break you. For a moment, Zara said nothing, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. Despite his infuriating demeanor, there was an undeniable truth in his words. She hated it, but she couldn't ignore it. You truly believe this is a victory? She said finally, her voice quieter than before. I do, Rick replied without hesitation. It's not the kind of victory you're used to, sure. But sometimes, winning means adapting. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's adapting. She leaned back in her throne, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not entirely uncomfortable. Finally she spoke. Very well, she said, her tone measured. If you are so confident in your perspective, perhaps you would be willing to prove it. Rick raised an eyebrow. Prove it how? A faint smirk tugged at the corners of her mouth, though it was more predatory than amused. You claim that humans excel at adapting. Let us see how well you adapt to our traditions. Rick blinked. Wait, you mean? Yes, she interrupted. You will participate in the full ritual. Every step, every trial, as our customs demand. He hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Isn't that a little unnecessary? I mean, we already. It is necessary, Stara said firmly, cutting him off. If you wish to prove that this alliance is more than a fluke, you will honor our traditions. Rick sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when I end up being too good at this, too. Her smirk widened, though there was a glint of mischief in her eyes. We shall see, human. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Rick was subjected to a series of alien rituals that ranged from mildly uncomfortable to downright bizarre. He wore ceremonial robes that were several sizes too large, drank concoctions that made his stomach churn, and recited chants that sounded more like tongue twisters. Is this really necessary? He asked at one point, struggling to balance a glowing orb on his head while standing on one leg. Completely, Stara replied, her amusement barely concealed. This is a test of your adaptability, is it not? By the time the final ritual was complete, Rick was exhausted but still standing. Stara watched him with a mixture of satisfaction and grudging respect. Despite the challenges, he hadn't backed down. It was infuriating, but also admirable. Well, Rick said, collapsing onto a nearby bench. I think that went pretty well. What's next? Another glowing orb? Maybe a round of alien charades? Stara rolled her eyes. You are impossible. And you're starting to like it? He shot back, grinning. She didn't respond, but the faintest flicker of a smile crossed her lips before she turned away. For the first time since this ordeal began, she felt a flicker of something unexpected, a sense of possibility. Perhaps this human wasn't as insufferable as she thought. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was exactly what her people needed.